All right, everyone, welcome to RSG Live at the Lounge. This is D. Wills. We're back in the building again. We've had incredible run of conversations on this platform. And, you can reach us at all of our platforms at realsportsguys.com. But I really enjoyed doing this series of conversations. And we got another special one today. We have Ryan Harris with us, Super Bowl champion with the Denver Broncos, the Super Bowl 50. I also mentioned he played for my Pittsburgh Steelers, so I got a little love for him. I didn't even tell him that. Also played at Notre Dame, and what's important is he has a degree in economics and political science, but he's also an author, Mindset for Mastery, an NFL Champion's Guide to Reaching Your Greatness. He's also a broadcast and media. We'll hear a lot about this, but it's great to have you here, Ryan. How you doing?
Thanks, D, for having me. I'm doing good out here, man. Life is good.
And we hope you're staying safe. That's the key. We always want to check in on that health and wellness, but it's good for you to be here. One of the things I always like to start these things out, I'm big into origin stories because everybody came from somewhere. And it's influenced them along the way. Can you talk a little bit about the things, the experiences throughout your life that kind of developed your philosophy and helped you to really get to this point where you are successful in multiple areas that you've been successful, but that just didn't happen overnight. There are things that you had to go through along the way to get here. Can you talk a little bit about those for folks who might not know your story?
Yeah, I had a combination of just no excuses with the way I was raised and who I was raised around, and just opportunities to see how much just placing yourself in the right situation can make you successful. I was born in St. Paul, Minnesota. My mom's side has a large family. My dad's side, I'm one of four, so we had some family growing up. And my grandparents on one side were just the quintessential patriarch and matriarch. My grandfather left Kentucky to go to Detroit for jobs, and my grandmother left with her father in the middle of the night because out of Alabama because they were going to get killed. So they got up to Detroit too. They met there, and so those are kind of the stalwarts. And then on my other side, my grandmother left the farm at 16 to go to college and got her degree in art from the University of Minnesota, then went to Berkeley where she taught, and then also and met my grandfather, came back and had 6 kids. So, and then I had my mother, who was just the youngest person ever and first person to get her job at the St. Paul Public Schools administration. And my dad's a mechanical engineer who's retired now. So education was huge, as well as never setting limits on yourself. And just because somebody around you hasn't done something doesn't mean you can't do it. So those kind of things really shaped me. And then when I started playing football when I was 14, I really just said, I'm going to maximize. I love doing this. I'm going to maximize being able to play as long as I can. And I'm going to make sure that if I can use football to get everything I want, I'm going to do it. And I did.
Well, one of the interesting things about it, and I think, and I'm beginning to read your book, but, as a former student athlete, former football player, one of the things people talk about is kind of the fear of success, right?
Yes.
Remember Hank Wiggins, my position coach, he played, Hank also played college football, played basketball with World Be Free. Hank always had these sayings. And so I remember my senior year, they kind of like did a thing on all the seniors and each position coach. And he said, we had just come out and win a state championship. He said, Devon has got to not have the fear of success. And I didn't quite know what that meant, but as going through life, it's something I think that when I'm working with students and stuff, it seems to paralyze people. How did you break through that kind of fear of success?
I just never had it. And fear of success means a lot of things to people, but when I hear fear of success, I hear, and I've experienced people not wanting to have that expectation on them. Hey, I don't want to be great, because if I'm great, then I have to be great all the time. I can be comfortable. And I mean, I'd say 15 to 20% of my teammates at Notre Dame were done playing football the moment they got on campus. They had gotten their scholarship. That was it. Like, they didn't care. They didn't want to be great. They didn't want to try and push themselves. You know, Mike Tomlin at the Pittsburgh Steelers calls those people comfort seekers, you know, and we forget how many people resist change in their life. They don't move, they don't change jobs, they don't change careers, they don't reach beyond what they've been given. And that just wasn't going to be me. I was not going to limit myself from success on the football field or the classroom. So fear of success was never outweighed my curiosity to succeed.
When you you know, you spend a lot of time talking to folks about, you know, kind of financial literacy and empowerment. You know, I grew up in a low income environment. You know, a lot of poor neighborhoods. People don't talk about that at the table. There's a national study on kind of success in education, and they say the one common thing, regardless of background, is that everyone has one meal together. But different things happen at those meals. And
Yes.
like their stuff is shared. You know, how did you get into this really push on like financial literacy? What are you finding? Because you know, I watched your video and your conversation with the folks at Google, and you had a lot of good tips on thinking about. But you know, when you talk about student athletes, you're talking about folks who especially in the revenue sports like football, you have a lot of folks come from working class backgrounds.
Yeah.
That's coming from poverty, where these are not conversations. You know, how do you, what are some of the keys or what are some of the things that you've learned along the way as you've gotten into this space?
Yeah, I mean, well, a couple of things, you know, growing up, you know, although I was growing up with, you know, no limits and keep
Yeah,
pushing, I never knew
yeah,
you could pay off debt. You know,
yeah,
debt was something that I just assumed everybody lived with. And
yeah.
how could you get more debt? And it wasn't until I was broke after making $1 million in the NFL when I was like, I've got to change what I'm doing here. Somehow this isn't working. But I became the wealthiest person in my family's history overnight.
Yeah.
And before I even got my money, I had, you know, an uncle give me an entire real estate, you know, pitch, which I'm like, dude, we were hanging out 2 nights ago and you give me this whole, and it was, oh, by the way, for the entire amount of my contract. So all these people start doing things around you. And of course you want to help your family, but how do you do it the right way? So I started by just investing. You know, I read this guy, Warren Buffett, you know, and he's talking about own what own what you know. So I literally, my first stocks were McDonald's, Google, Apple, Microsoft, and Chipotle. And man, you know, I forgot about them and came back to them. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to keep investing, putting some money away. But it was also just learning that wealth does not look rich. You know, I grew up, and even for me, when you have money to buy something, it's hard to say no, especially when you're just looking at the price. But I started noticing how many people around me were going broke trying to purchase things at the price and not the cost. You know, guys in the NFL get got all the time. They got a $300,000 contract and they see a $150,000 car. They think they can afford that. Well, 300,000 is really probably 180 after taxes and an agent. And then, oh, by the way, you need to eat, drink, and whatever. So if you buy a $150,000 car, you got $30,000 to eat. And I was seeing this over and over again. And I would see it in life, you know, over and over. People get it raised and, oh, they got to buy a new house. You want to refinance just to redo your kitchen, even though you're not going to sell your home for 20 years. So I really started digging deep, and especially looking at the behavior of how we treat money, because that's what makes 78% of NFL players broke 2 years after they're done playing. The behaviors that we all have around money. And if we can just delay our purchases, know the difference between price and cost, and learn how to invest, you can really create long lasting change.
And it's interesting about that. I mean, I just late in life, and so I've been reading this book on didn't even know that you could leverage whole life insurance in a way that would allow you to create your own banking system. And I sat there, and I had to go through 2 meetings to kind of like wrap my head around it. And when I told people, like, is that a Ponzi scheme? No, it's like, this is what this is what the Rockefellers do.
That's what the wealthy people do. Yeah.
What the wealthy people do, but you don't have to be wealthy to actually do it. And I didn't, it was like foreign to me. And so like getting access to this kind of information, where do you start when you are someone who's starting from zero, right? You don't know.
Yeah. I started just by the USA Today comes to every NFL locker room every day, but no one ever touched the USA Today money section. I mean, you've got 10, 20 millionaires all just walking past, not grabbing it. So I just started reading the USA Today money page, and you just start looking at different trends. But I'd also say just invest even a little bit, because you learn so much. You learn the language. You understand the power. Once you understand that $120 can get you a share of Apple or a new pair of shoes, you ain't gonna be buying that many new pairs of shoes. You know what I'm saying? It totally changes the way you see money. And so, and just reading about real estate, one of the things a lot of people come to me, ask me for financial advice, and I'm not a financial advisor. They say, hey, I'm thinking about buying a house. What do you have to say? One, buy a house far smaller than you think. And two, buy a duplex. Don't buy a house. I got a young man who's 30 years old at our radio station. He wants to buy a house. I'm like, dude, you need a duplex. You have no wife, no kids. Like, get a duplex, and then you can have income for the rest of your life. And he's just like, and he literally said, wait, I can buy a duplex? Like, yeah, but so much of this information is withheld for a reason. Good people don't want us to be intelligent, don't want us to be leveraged to the gills, because that's less money for them. But good communities are built on people who have financial literacy, who own their home, who own their space, who don't buy a car that's more than half their income. Oh, by the way, that's from Dr. King's Drum Major Instinct. Who don't buy a house that's more than twice their income. There are parameters to be successful and to create long-lasting wealth, neighborhoods, schools. We just have to do it.
And that kind of hits me into the next area. You, as you mentioned, you're from St. Paul, you're from the Twin Cities area. The death of George Floyd ignited a movement, as well as folks like Breonna Taylor and others. But, George Floyd seemed to be the tipping point. Watching that, basically in your backyard, your space, talk a little bit about what you were feeling when you were seeing it, and how it might have sparked and helped you pivot in some of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it was the most violent video I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I've never seen such disregard for human life for so long. It was awful. And I'll also tell you, I've never been the same since Trayvon Martin. I mean, I was that kid,
Yep.
So for me, it was a combination of just this absolute anger and frustration, and hope that, now I don't have to tell people, like, yeah, racism is everywhere I go. Racism is when I had a police officer stop me when I was going to, from practice at the Steelers to Wexford, Pennsylvania. It's about 35 minutes. And he said, "What's there for you?" And I said, "Excuse me, officer?" He said, "What's there for you?" And I said, "Well, I live there." So then he let me go. But it's just little things like that. But to see that violence, and especially being from the Twin Cities, it hit home for me, as unfortunately every single person of color has a situation where it hits home for them. It's home for where it's either where they grew up with their grandparents or their parents or their uncle or someone else. Eric Gardner, if you're from New York City, Sandra Bland getting stopped in Texas, we could continue to keep going with names, Tamir Rice, if you're in Cleveland, San Francisco. So we've got all these situations that hit home. And the big piece that I've been saying is it's real, but let's dig in. Let's get past this. And there is going to be significant resistance, as we've seen already. But we must change the ability for police to get away with murdering an unarmed person on a non-violent call. We have to radically change how we treat and criminalize non-violent crimes. If you steal $300 worth of food on stolen credit cards, you can get a felony for 2 to 6 years. Well, by the way, it takes $600 to get processed in jail, so we've already overpaid for crime. And then it's $33,000 a year. So we're willing to pay $70,000 of taxpayer money for a nonviolent crime. These are the things we have to look at. We also have to look at education and funding. We have to look at healthcare and representation of minority doctors, but we must also raise our expectations of one another's capability. When people see me, they do not think, hey, that guy could have went to Notre Dame and gotten 2 degrees in 3.5 years and is a father of 3, a husband of 1. They don't put that on me. I'm a threat to them, and that's it. And we have got to raise our expectations of what one another are capable of, especially when they are different skin color than us.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on some critical things. I remember sharing with my colleagues that for the first time, sharing them that, I'm driving to Madison, Wisconsin from South Central Wisconsin every day to work. And I wear a lanyard on mine with my ID because I don't want to have any question. If
Nope.
I stop driving the back roads of Wisconsin and they said I didn't show my ID, they lying.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things. But I said, how many people who almost have a doctorate, who's a senior administrator, have to drive to work with an ID on their chest because they're afraid of getting stopped, and that the microaggressions and the impact it has on your health. So, I mean, people raising their expectations about who we are and what we bring to the table. I think you hit it right on the head. I mean, I think it's an important notion. One of the things that you quoted Dr. King, and like you just teeing these things up for me, because one of the things that Dr. King understood, even as you talked about in the quote, is the importance of economics, economic empowerment, economic justice. And I'm seeing an incredible movement. But one of the things that is missing, and I think, one is around policy, but also around strengthening an economic platform.
Yes.
Or to provide some advice on the things that we need to think about in terms of having an economic platform that can kind of push things over and start to change the conditions in many of our communities. What are some of those suggestions you would make?
Yeah, number one, saving money is hard to do. So know that it is one of the hardest things you're going to have to do as an adult. Two, delay your purchases 3 months to 3 years. But three, you must own what you buy. If you cannot pay for it cash, don't buy something else until you pay it off. Just practice paying off debt. That way you can own a home. And then when you go to a city council meeting, and no matter what anybody else's expectations are, you can open that statement with, I'm a homeowner here in this city. I'm a homeowner here in this district. I'm a homeowner here. And I want you to know that I don't feel safe as an African American. I want you to know that we need better schools. We need better. When you put that in there, when you pay your taxes on an annual basis, that really changes the conversation. It gives you credibility. It gives you stability. It makes people see you when you own what you buy. And so in that way, we can create real and lasting change, because gentrification should be one of the greatest terms in financial fitness for my people of color. Now, however, because of redlining and no actual guidance on how to save and build wealth, we don't own the places that have suddenly become the heart of the city. Now, had we owned things and owned homes and not been hit with prejudice lending practices, it'd be very different. But we have that opportunity now, and we must take it. And to your point, I just got to say, people confuse and miss all the time. As much as Dr. King was talking about peace, in every speech of his, you can hear his economic message. And that's what ultimately had him murdered in Memphis. He was supporting the garbage workers in Memphis and their rights to gain gainful and meaningful employment. And he was murdered after that. So those are the kinds of things that people miss all the time in terms of how important it is to be economically sound and safe.
Yeah, I mean, I've even talked to people even about the power of developing a neighborhood association because you have a platform. I never understood. I'm like, why am I paying this fee? And I remember that I walked into a meeting, it was in Rockford, Illinois. I'm walking into a meeting and they got the alder person there. They got people from the police department. I'm like, they got all these folks coming to this meeting? And all they was talking about was putting speed bumps throughout the neighborhood. And
yep.
They got all these folks there, and the power of organizing through a neighborhood association leverages your power along with the things that you're talking about, where you can start to implement policies, even on how you might want to have, micro economic opportunities for people within your space. You might want to have some different kind of zoning happening. But I think, things about ownership is really important. Even being a minority business, are you registered?
Yeah.
There are policies where I see a lot of folks who are journey people who are doing plumbing and all that other stuff, who could be having, a small business that contractors have to have a certain percentage on some of these contracts of minority businesses, but they're not registered. But so it's understanding that power, I think, is really important.
I had somebody tell me, he said, Ryan, do you want to start an HVAC company? I said, why? He said, because if you did, you'd have over $1 million in government contracts every year.
Yeah.
Whoa. Well, how many other people know that? You know what I'm saying? How
Yes.
many other people know? And also, but it also matters what you do
Yes.
when you make money.
Yeah.
You know, don't spend money. You know, one of the things, Patrick Mahomes just got a brand new $503 million deal. And on my radio show, my other co-host was like, here are 12 things he can do with his money. And all of them involved him spending it all. I'm like, this is what's exactly wrong with the mentality of getting money. You know, it's your Patrick Mahomes. You made a sign a $503 million contract. Don't spend any money for a year and a half. Save everything for a year and a half. Your life didn't change. Don't let other people's expectations change. You don't need a new Rolls Royce or something. You can still buy one later, right? But don't start spending your money right when you get it. And even that concept can be revolutionary for your finances and your financial future by just not spending the money you make right away.
Yeah, I think, you know, people miss, Shaq is brilliant about that. I had to ride in a plane with someone who went to school with Shaq, and that's what makes Shaq so great. And people see him fooling around up there, but Shaq has been building his model since he was younger. And I remember him famously saying, he's like, 3% on $1 million is still pretty good. I mean, Shaq is all about saving, right? All the things you're talking about, you know, you see people do this all the way. And it's one of the things when I watched Chris Borland being able to walk away from football when he did what he did, what was interesting about that was that when I talked to him, he had already positioned himself financially. When he went out to San Francisco, he didn't buy anything up crazy. He was already positioning himself. He didn't know he was going to leave football, but he was able to do it because he did the things that you talked about doing. He can make that critical life-altering decision that I think still is painful for him, but he had the capacity to do it because he thought about the financial stuff even before he knew he was going to make the decision. And so he's been to run it. So all the things you say are right on point. And you can do that whether you're making $1 million or $50,000. I didn't know that growing up. I made all the mistakes in the world, but I'm glad you're sharing this.
Well, and if you're under the age of 25, $100 invested by the age of 25 turns into $30,000 when you're 65. So it doesn't matter how much money you make, like you said, if you are willing to invest $3,500 just before you're 25, compound interest, growth, dividends, you're going to be a millionaire. And that's just the mentality that we have not been teaching versus, hey, buy and grow as quick as possible. Well, if it fails, at least we tried. Like, no, there's a sustained growth pattern that's worked for the history of this company, that wealthy people who are at country clubs and who own boardrooms and companies, this is what they do. They delay their purchases and make them at a later date for far less money than it would have cost them to do it earlier on.
Yeah, one of the things I just learned that fits with you is like, again, you're late in life, but never too late to learn. It's like the stock market, no matter what, every 11 years gets back to make it over since the beginning. No matter
since the beginning,
depressions, 11-year turn. If you're willing to stay in, you're gonna make that money. And I sat there like, wow, you know, how many people know this, right? How many people understand this? That a lot of it is, you know, which is difficult. It's like, it's about patience, right? You have to be patient. And people struggle with this idea in the, you know, in the microwave environment we are, to be patient, right? Which is something you learn as an athlete, particularly as a lineman. You got to learn to be patient. Like, things happen, but to get to that next level, to block and then go to the next level, like, plays develop. I always say that, you know, life is like being a running back. If you play life like Le'Veon Bell runs a football, you're gonna win. He's the most you've ever seen. But it takes a little bit to learn to be that patient. Patience is a big critical thing. One of the things I want to talk to you about here as we close, I just love this conversation, and I love the opportunity to have you come back and spend time.
Anytime,
is you know, you're a student athlete, and one of the things I learned early on, I've been working with a number of people in our local community. And there's so many rules around student athletes. Even this idea of financial literacy, it's hard to even get. Sometimes they have programs for athletes, but things are so regulated, even to have opportunities for them to get information, to be able to do what they do. If you're making some recommendations to the NCAA about ways to enhance the student athlete experience, particularly from the student athlete development side, what kind of things would you recommend as someone who's, you play college football, been around college football. Now you're, you know, working around college football. What recommendations would you make?
Yeah, bring me in to speak. Well, number one,
we hope we can do that. We're gonna
Yeah,
push that. We're gonna push
we'll hit
that.
them all, you know. But you know, you have what people fail to remember about student athletes is there is absolutely no contact with the real world. And what I mean by that is an example. I got an internship. I was in the NFL because I learned at Notre Dame how to use resources, and the NFL kind of help you do whatever you want to do in the off season. Well, I went to be an administrator, assistant, an intern at their athletics department of compliance, right? But they gave me a job to run some copies. I didn't know how to run a copy machine. Here I am. I made $4 million in my life. I never touched a copy machine. How many athletes have done that, you know? So you just forget how much even an internship for 3 days or a day can drastically change the perception of the outside world and what's available. I mean, we talked earlier, the majority of athletes do not come from high wealth situations. Well, what does that look like? Can you put them with a lawyer? Can you show them the pace of everyday life? I mean, sitting in a law office will really make you appreciate being able to go outside and practice, right? Or working at a nonprofit can really show you how much work people do for not as much money as you would think. You know, trying to get lunch during lunchtime is this whole process. Do you want to bring lunch? By the way, eating from home 3 times a week can save you $92,000 over your career. Do you know what a career versus a job looks like? You know, and so these are all things that what I would make sure if I was an athletic department, I'm bringing in speakers to give experiences and really put knowledge into these kids from where they've sat, as well as expose them to multiple real world situations. They have 4 to 5 years. The fact that even at Notre Dame, I was not in a designated athletic program with some of the auxiliary alumni that can, hey, come learn about this for a day. Come learn about the stock market for a day. I mean, it's a big value miss that you have as a university to provide to your student athletes or students, but especially student athletes who are doing 40 to 60 hours a week of work. Make sure they get exposure to the real world.
Hey man, I want to thank you. This is hopefully the first of several times we have you on, and I want to make sure people go and check your book out, Mindset for Mastery, an NFL Champion's Guide to Reaching Your Greatness. We will have that link on our description so you can get right to it. We need to support Ryan and all he's doing. Ryan, if people want to see you, I know you got a show coming up. Tell them a little bit about your show, where they catch you on social media or the website. I want to make sure people can follow you.
Yeah, check me out, RyanHarris68.com. I've got a weekday show here in Denver, 10 to 2, Masters of the Midday. We talk sports. I also do Notre Dame football radio broadcasts, and I do some Monday Night Football broadcasts, and do some TV here in Denver. But on Twitter, you can search Ryan Harris, or on Instagram at RyanHarris_68. And I'm always here as a reference. So if I can help in any way, please let me know.
Hey, the reason why we started RSG Live at the Lounge is that we wanted to bring, folks on who could drop some gems, some knowledge, and you've done that, my man. And we appreciate all you do, and thank you for being on the show with us. And we look forward to having you back again soon.
Vaughn, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, my man. Nice to meet you and chat.
Yes.